The train whistle screamed through the frozen January air of 1884 as Eleanor Hartwell clutched the only possession she had left in this world, a threadbare quilt her grandmother had stitched 30 years ago. Its once vibrant blues and greens now faded to muted grays and browns that matched the desolate landscape rushing past her window. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass, watching the endless Wyoming territory unfold before her eyes. Mile after empty mile of snow-dusted prairie that stretched toward mountains she could barely see through the gathering dusk. 23 years old, and she had nothing. No family, no money beyond the few coins sewn into the hem of her worn dress, no prospects waiting at the end of this journey. The quilt lay across her lap, her fingers tracing the familiar patterns her grandmother's hands had created, each stitch a memory of a life that had crumbled like dried leaves. The consumption had taken her mother first, then her father within weeks of each other, leaving Eleanor alone in a Philadelphia boarding house with debts she could never repay. The landlady had been surprisingly kind, pressing a train ticket west into her palm along with a name scrawled on paper. "My cousin runs a boarding house in Redemption, Wyoming," the woman had said, her eyes soft with pity that had made Eleanor want to weep. "She needs help, and you need a fresh start. God willing, you will find something better out there." So Eleanor had packed what little she owned into a carpet bag, only to have it stolen at the Chicago station while she slept on a bench, waiting for her connection. Everything gone except the quilt she had been using as a blanket, wrapped so tightly around her body that the thief must have decided it was not worth the trouble of waking her. Now here she was, 3 days later, arriving in a town she had never heard of until a week ago, with nothing but the clothes on her back and this worn piece of fabric that smelled faintly of lavender and home. The conductor's voice rang through the car. "Redemption, 15 minutes to Redemption." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. She folded the quilt carefully, pressing it against her chest as if it could shield her from whatever waited ahead. The other passengers began gathering their belongings, a rancher in a weather-beaten hat, a family with 3 small children who had cried most of the journey, a salesman with a case full of goods he had spent hours describing to anyone who would listen. They all had somewhere to go, people waiting for them. Eleanor had a scrap of paper with an address and a prayer that this cousin would actually take her in. The train lurched and squealed as it slowed, and Eleanor caught her first glimpse of Redemption through the window. It was smaller than she had imagined, just a collection of wooden buildings huddled together against the vast emptiness of the plains, smoke rising from chimneys into the pale winter sky. The main street was frozen mud, rutted with wagon tracks, and a few horses stood tied to hitching posts, their breath rising in clouds. Mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks white with snow that caught the last rays of sunlight. The train shuddered to a stop, and Eleanor rose on shaking legs. She had not eaten more than a few bites of bread since Chicago, spending her precious coins sparingly, and dizziness washed over her as she made her way down the aisle. The cold hit her like a physical blow when she stepped onto the platform, wind cutting through her thin coat as if it were made of paper. She had not thought about how much colder it would be out here, how different from the city streets she knew. The platform emptied quickly, passengers met by waiting friends and family, disappearing into the gathering darkness. Eleanor stood alone, the quilt clutched in her arms, watching the warm glow of lanterns being lit in windows along the street. She pulled out the paper, squinting at the words in the fading light. Mrs. Abigail Thornton, boarding house on Cedar Street. But which way was Cedar Street? The platform was deserted now, the train already pulling away with a mournful whistle that echoed her own loneliness. "You look lost." Eleanor spun around, startled. A man stood a few feet away, and in the dim light she could make out a tall figure in a long coat, a hat pulled low over his eyes. Her heart raced with sudden fear. All the warnings about the Wild West flooding her mind, stories of outlaws and desperados who preyed on travelers. "I am fine, thank you," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, taking a step backward. The man raised his hands slightly, palms out. "Did not mean to frighten you. Just noticed you standing here alone in the cold. Most folks have someone meeting them. You waiting for someone." There was something in his voice that made Eleanor pause, a gentleness that did not match her fears. He stepped closer, and she could see him better now. He was young, perhaps late 20s, with a strong jaw shadowed with stubble and eyes that looked kind even in the darkness. His coat was worn but well made, and despite his size, there was nothing threatening in his posture. "I am looking for Cedar Street," Eleanor said finally, deciding that asking for help was better than freezing on this platform. "Mrs. Thornton's boarding house. Abigail Thornton." The man's face brightened. "That is just down the main road past the general store. I can show you if you like. I am headed that direction anyway." Eleanor hesitated, every instinct warning her about accepting help from strange men, but the cold was seeping into her bones, and the street was completely dark now. "I would appreciate that, thank you." "Name's Thomas Reed," the man said, falling into step beside her as they walked down the wooden steps from the platform. "Most folks call me Tom. I run a ranch about 5 miles north of town." "Eleanor Hartwell," she replied, keeping the quilt pressed against her chest. Her feet crunched on the frozen ground, and she could feel the cold through the thin soles of her boots. Tom noticed her shivering and frowned. "You do not have any other luggage, no trunk." Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks despite the cold. "It was stolen in Chicago. This is all I have left." She held up the quilt slightly, immediately regretting the admission. What must he think of her, arriving in town with nothing but a worn blanket? But Tom's expression did not change to pity or judgment. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "That is a shame. Chicago stations are notorious for thieves. My brother lost everything but his saddle when he passed through there 5 years back." He gestured down the street. "Abigail's place is just ahead, the 2-story building with the green door. She runs a good establishment, fair prices." "Her cousin in Philadelphia said she might have work for me," Eleanor said, hope and fear mingling in her chest. What if there was no work? What if the woman did not even remember making the offer? "Abigail always needs help," Tom assured her. "The boarding house stays pretty full, especially in winter when the cowhands come into town. You have experience with that kind of work." "I kept house for my parents before they passed," Eleanor said quietly. "I know how to cook and clean and mend. I am a hard worker." They had reached the building now, warm light spilling from the windows onto the frozen street. Eleanor could hear voices and laughter from inside, the sounds of normal life that seemed impossibly distant from her own circumstances. Tom climbed the steps to the porch and knocked firmly on the door. It opened almost immediately, revealing a stout woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun and sharp blue eyes that swept over Eleanor with quick assessment. "Tom Reed, what brings you to town in the middle of the week?" "Evening, Abigail. Brought you a visitor. This is Eleanor Hartwell, says your cousin in Philadelphia sent her out here." Abigail's expression shifted from curiosity to recognition. "Eleanor, yes, Margaret wrote me about you. Land's sake, child, you look half frozen. Come in, come in." She pulled the door open wider, ushering Eleanor inside with firm efficiency. "Tom, you want to come in for coffee?" "No thank you, ma'am. I have got supplies to load still before the store closes." "Just wanted to make sure Miss Hartwell found you safely." He tipped his hat to Eleanor. "Welcome to redemption, Miss Hartwell. I hope you find what you are looking for here." Eleanor met his eyes, seeing genuine warmth there that made something flutter unexpectedly in her chest. "Thank you, Mr. Reed. I appreciate your kindness." He smiled, a slow expression that transformed his weathered face, then turned and walked back into the night. Abigail closed the door against the cold and turned to Eleanor with hands on her hips, studying her with those sharp eyes. "Well now, let me look at you. Margaret said you had lost your parents, poor thing, and good grief, is that all you have?" She gestured to the quilt. Eleanor nodded, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming her. "My bag was stolen." "I am sorry. I know I am not much to look at right now, but I promise I am willing to work hard. I can do whatever you need, and I will not complain about the hours or the tasks. I just need a place to stay and a chance to start over." Abigail's stern expression softened. Now, no need to look so frightened. Any cousin of Margaret's is family to me, and family does not turn away family in need. You look like you have not had a decent meal in days. Come on back to the kitchen and let me get some food in you. Then we will talk about work and such. The warmth of the boarding house enveloped Eleanor like an embrace, as she followed Abigail through a neat parlor where several men sat playing cards, down a hallway to a large kitchen that smelled of bread and stew. The heat from the massive iron stove was glorious, and Eleanor could not stop the small sound of relief that escaped her lips. "Sit," Abigail commanded, pointing to a chair at a worn wooden table. She ladled stew into a bowl and cut a thick slice of bread, setting both in front of Eleanor along with a cup of hot coffee. "Eat slowly now, or you will make yourself sick." Eleanor wanted to devour the food, but she heeded the warning, forcing herself to take small bites even though every cell in her body screamed with hunger. The stew was rich with beef and vegetables, the bread fresh and slathered with butter. It was the best thing she had ever tasted. Abigail sat across from her, nursing her own cup of coffee. "So Margaret tells me you are on your own now. No other family?" "No, ma'am," Eleanor said between careful bites. "My parents were both only children and my grandparents passed years ago." "There is no one else." "Well, you have got someone now," Abigail said firmly. "Here is the situation. I run this boarding house with 12 rooms usually full. I do all the cooking, cleaning, and laundry myself, and I am getting too old for it. My back gives me trouble, and my hands ache something fierce in the winter. I need someone who can help with the daily work, someone reliable who will not run off the minute a cowboy makes eyes at her." "I will not run off," Eleanor promised. "I have nowhere to run to, and even if I did, I am not the kind of person who shirks her responsibilities." Abigail nodded approvingly. "Good. Here is what I am offering. Room and board plus $3 a week. The room is small up in the attic, but it is warm and private. You will work 6 days a week, helping with everything from breakfast to bed making to laundry. Sundays you will have mostly to yourself, though you will still need to help with meals." "Is that acceptable?" $3 a week was not much, but it was more than Eleanor had hoped for. Room and board meant she would not starve or freeze and she could start saving. Maybe eventually she could afford a dress that did not have patches, boots that did not let in water. Maybe she could build something resembling a life. "Yes, ma'am, that is more than acceptable." "Thank you. You can start tomorrow morning. Breakfast is at 6, so you will need to be up at 5 to help me prepare. For tonight, finish your supper and I will show you to your room. There is a washroom on the 2nd floor you can use. I will find you an extra dress and some warmer clothes until you can afford your own." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes at this unexpected generosity. She had been so afraid, so certain she would be turned away or exploited, and instead, she had found kindness. "I do not know how to thank you." "Thank me by being a good worker and not making me regret this," Abigail said, but her tone was not unkind. "Now finish up. You look dead on your feet." The attic room was indeed small, tucked under the eaves with a sloped ceiling that would require her to duck in places, but it had a real bed with a thick mattress and quilts, a small dresser, and a window that looked out over the main street. After the crowded boarding house in Philadelphia and the nightmare of the train journey, it seemed like a palace. Eleanor spread her grandmother's quilt carefully over the other blankets, smoothing out the wrinkles with gentle hands. She undressed in the cold air, shivering as she pulled on the nightgown Abigail had provided, then burrowed under the covers. The bed was soft and warm, and for the first time in months, Eleanor felt the tight knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen. She had made it. She was here in Redemption, Wyoming, and she had a job and a place to sleep and food in her belly. Tomorrow would bring hard work, but she was not afraid of that. Hard work she could handle. It was the uncertainty that had been killing her, the not knowing where her next meal would come from or where she would sleep. As she drifted towards sleep, her last conscious thought was of Tom Reed's kind eyes and gentle voice. "Welcome to Redemption," he had said. She hoped that was exactly what she would find here. Morning came brutally early. Eleanor woke to darkness and cold, fumbling for the matches Abigail had left to light the small lamp. Her body ached from the journey, muscles stiff and protesting as she dressed in the simple gray dress Abigail had provided. It was worn but clean, warmer than her own and fit reasonably well. The house was quiet as she made her way downstairs, but the kitchen was already warm, Abigail stoking the fire in the massive stove. "Good, you are prompt," the older woman said approvingly. "Can you make biscuits?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then get started on those while I work on the eggs and bacon. There is flour in that bin, lard in the crock. I need 6 dozen biscuits." Eleanor set to work, her hands remembering the familiar motions even as her mind struggled to fully wake. She had made biscuits hundreds of times in her mother's kitchen, and the work was soothing, grounding her in this strange new place. Abigail moved around the kitchen with efficient precision, and they worked in companionable silence as the sky outside slowly lightened from black to gray. By 6 o'clock, the dining room was filled with the smell of fresh biscuits, bacon, eggs, and coffee. The boarders began filing in, a mix of cowboys, ranch hands, and a few townspeople who took their meals at Abigail's rather than cooking for themselves. Eleanor helped serve, keeping her eyes down and her manner quiet, conscious of the curious stares from the men. "Who is the new girl, Abigail?" One of the cowboys asked, a young man with red hair and a friendly smile. "This is Eleanor." "She is helping me now, so you all best mind your manners," Abigail said firmly, in a tone that brooked no argument. Eleanor appreciated the warning in her voice. She had been worried about unwanted attention, but Abigail clearly ran a respectable establishment and would not tolerate any nonsense from her boarders. The morning passed in a blur of activity. After breakfast came the washing up, then stripping and making beds, hauling water, sweeping floors, preparing lunch. Eleanor's back ached and her hands grew red and chapped from the hot water and lye soap, but she did not slow down. This was her chance, perhaps her only chance, and she would not squander it. By mid-afternoon, Abigail called a break. They sat at the kitchen table with cups of tea, and Eleanor was grateful to sit down, her feet throbbing in her worn boots. "You are a hard worker, I will give you that," Abigail said. "You did not complain once, even with the heavy lifting. I think we will get along just fine." "I meant what I said last night," Eleanor replied. "I am grateful for this opportunity." "Well, tomorrow is Saturday, which means we will be even busier." Saturday nights, the boarding house fills up with cowboys from the ranches coming into town. They want baths and hot meals and clean beds, and they pay extra for the privilege. "It will be our busiest time." Eleanor nodded, already dreading the additional work but determined to manage it. She was about to ask about the schedule when there was a knock at the back door. Abigail rose to answer it, and Tom Reed stepped into the kitchen, his hat in his hands. "Afternoon, Abigail. Sorry to bother you." His eyes found Eleanor, and something in his expression softened. "Miss Hartwell, I am glad to see you are settling in." "Mr. Reed," Eleanor said, suddenly self-conscious about her work-worn appearance, the strands of hair that had escaped her bun. "Thank you again for your help last night." "Actually, that is why I am here," Tom said, looking a bit uncomfortable. "I was in the general store this morning, and I remembered you said you lost all your belongings. I thought maybe you could use some basics to get started." He held out a wrapped package. "Just some practical things, nothing fancy. I hope you will not take offense." Eleanor stared at the package, her heart doing something strange in her chest. She rose slowly from her chair. "Mr. Reed, I cannot accept charity from a stranger." "It is not charity," Tom said quickly. "Think of it as a welcome gift. Redemption takes care of its own, and you are part of redemption now. Besides, it is just some socks and gloves and such. Things you will need with winter setting in hard." Abigail was watching them both with interest, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Land's sake, Eleanor, just take the man's gift. He is right, you need warm things, and Tom's not the sort to expect anything in return. Are you, Tom?" "No, ma'am," Tom said firmly. "I just hate to think of anyone going without necessities, especially someone new to town who has had a run of bad luck." Eleanor reached out slowly and took the package, her fingers brushing against Tom's for just a moment. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through her. "Thank you, Mr. Reed." "This is very kind of you." "Tom," he said, "please just call me Tom. We do not stand much on formality out here." "Then you must call me Eleanor." He smiled that slow, transforming smile again. "Eleanor, that is a pretty name, suits you." Abigail cleared her throat meaningfully. "Tom, did you come all the way into town just to deliver that package, or was there some other business?" Tom had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Well, I did need to pick up some supplies from the smithy, and I wanted to talk to you about possibly taking an extra room for the next month. My foreman, Jack, usually bunks out at the ranch, but his wife is coming to visit and I thought they might appreciate some privacy. Would you have space?" "I have got one room left," Abigail said. "The small one on the second floor, east side. $3 a week includes breakfast and supper." "That would be perfect. He will be coming in Monday if that works for you." "It works fine." "Eleanor, write that down in the ledger, would you?" "Jack," she paused, looking at Tom. "Jack Morrison," Tom supplied. As Eleanor moved to the desk in the corner to make the notation, she was acutely aware of Tom's presence in the room. There was something about him that made her feel both nervous and safe at the same time, a contradiction she did not quite understand. She had never been particularly interested in men before, too busy caring for her ailing parents, and the few who had shown interest in her back in Philadelphia had seemed more concerned with her modest inheritance than with her as a person. But Tom was different. He had helped her without knowing anything about her, had gone out of his way to make sure she had what she needed, and expected nothing in return. That kind of genuine kindness was rare in her experience. "Eleanor," she realized Tom was speaking to her and jerked her attention back. "I am sorry, what did you say?" "I was just saying that if you need anything else, anything at all, you can leave word at the general store and I will get the message. I come into town most Saturdays for supplies." "That is very generous, but I am sure I will be fine now," Eleanor said, though part of her hoped he would come by anyway. "Still, the offer stands." He settled his hat back on his head and nodded to both women. "Ladies, I will let you get back to your work. Abigail, thank you for the room. Eleanor, it was good to see you again." After he left, Abigail gave Eleanor a knowing look. "That Tom Reed is one of the good ones. Got his ranch through hard work, treats his men fair, and does not spend his money on whiskey and gambling like some of the others. Any woman would be lucky to catch his eye." Eleanor felt her cheeks heat. "I am sure I do not know what you mean." "Of course you do not," Abigail said with a laugh. "Now back to work. Those sheets will not wash themselves." That evening, alone in her attic room, Eleanor unwrapped Tom's package. Inside, she found thick wool socks, warm gloves, a knitted scarf, a bar of good soap, a hairbrush, and a small packet of hairpins. At the bottom was a note in a masculine scrawl. "Welcome to redemption. I hope you will be happy here, Tom." Eleanor pressed the note to her chest, surprised by the tears that sprang to her eyes. She had been alone for so long, had felt so invisible and unwanted, and this simple kindness from a near stranger undid something inside her. She folded the note carefully and tucked it into the corner of her grandmother's quilt, then tried on the gloves. They fit perfectly. Saturday proved to be every bit as exhausting as Abigail had promised. The boarding house filled with cowboys and ranch hands, all wanting baths and meals and clean rooms. Eleanor worked from dawn until well past dark, hauling water, scrubbing floors, washing dishes, serving food. Her back screamed in protest, and her hands were raw despite the gloves Tom had given her, which she saved for trips outside. But there was something satisfying about the work too. She was useful here, needed. The boarders thanked her for the meals, complimented her biscuits, treated her with respect. Abigail praised her efficiency and stamina, and by the time Sunday morning arrived, Eleanor felt like she had truly earned her place. Sunday was theoretically a day of rest, but there was still breakfast and lunch to prepare, though Abigail made simpler meals that did not require as much work. Many of the boarders attended church services in the small whitewashed building at the end of town, and Abigail encouraged Eleanor to go as well. "It is a good way to meet people," she said. "Folks are more welcoming in redemption than in some places, but you still need to make an effort. The church is where the community comes together." So Eleanor put on her least worn dress, wrapped the scarf Tom had given her around her neck, and walked to church through the cold morning. The building was small and drafty, heated by a single wood stove, but it was packed with people. She slipped into a back pew, conscious of the curious glances from the townspeople. The service was simple. The minister, an elderly man with kind eyes, speaking about new beginnings and redemption, themes that resonated deeply with Eleanor. She found herself truly listening, thinking about her own new beginning, this chance she had been given to start over. As the service ended and people filed out, several women approached her. They were friendly enough, if a bit reserved, asking about where she was from and how she was finding redemption. Eleanor answered politely, careful not to reveal too much about her desperate circumstances. She was just beginning to feel overwhelmed by the attention when a familiar voice spoke behind her. "Eleanor, good morning." She turned to find Tom standing there, dressed in clean trousers and a pressed shirt, his hair still damp from washing. He looked different without his work coat and hat, younger somehow, and Eleanor felt that strange flutter in her chest again. "Tom, good morning. I did not expect to see you here." "I thought you lived outside of town." "I do, but I try to make it to services most Sundays when the weather permits. It is good for the soul, my mother always said, and good for business too. Half my ranch dealings get settled in conversation after church." He glanced at the women who had been talking to Eleanor, and they suddenly found reasons to move along, leaving the two of them in relative privacy. "How was your first week?" "Exhausting but good," Eleanor admitted. "Abigail is a fair employer and the work is honest. I cannot complain." "You look tired," Tom said, studying her face with concern. "Abigail is not working you too hard, is she?" "No more than is fair. I am just not used to the physical labor yet. I will adjust. Still, you should not wear yourself out completely. This town can be hard on newcomers if they do not pace themselves." He hesitated, then said, "I was wondering if you might like to take a walk. It is not too cold today, and I thought I could show you around town properly. If you have the time, that is." Eleanor's first instinct was to refuse. She barely knew this man, and accepting his invitation felt dangerous somehow. like opening a door she might not be able to close. But another part of her, the part that had been so lonely for so long, yearned for connection, for the simple pleasure of talking with someone who seemed genuinely interested in her as a person. "I have a few hours before I need to help with supper," she said carefully. "A walk would be nice." Tom's face lit up, and they fell into step together, walking down the main street of Redemption. The town was small enough to cover in 20 minutes if you walked briskly, but Tom set a leisurely pace, pointing out landmarks and telling stories. "That is the general store, run by Henry Walsh. Good man, fair prices. Over there is the smithy, best blacksmith within 50 miles. That building with the blue door is the doctor's office, though Doc Carter spends more time treating horses than people most days." Eleanor listened, enjoying the warmth in Tom's voice when he talked about the town and its people. It was clear he loved this place, felt connected to it in a way she had never felt connected to Philadelphia. "How long have you lived here?" she asked. "About 6 years now. I came out from Missouri with nothing but my horse and enough money for a small piece of land. Built my ranch from the ground up, one fence post at a time." There was pride in his voice, but not arrogance. "It has been hard work, but it is mine, you know. Every building, every head of cattle, every acre of grazing land, I built that." "That must be a wonderful feeling," Eleanor said quietly, "to have something that is truly yours." Tom looked at her, really looked at her, and she had the sense that he was seeing past her worn dress and tired face to something deeper. "You will have that too, Eleanor. I can tell you are a fighter. You did not come all the way out here to give up." "I did not come here by choice," she said before she could stop herself. "I came because I had nowhere else to go." "Maybe," Tom said, "but you are still here. You could have stayed in Philadelphia and taken charity or married some man you did not love just for security. Instead, you got on a train and came west to start over. That takes courage." Eleanor had never thought of it that way. She had felt like a coward, running away from her problems, but Tom's words cast her journey in a different light. Maybe there was courage in choosing the unknown over the familiar. They walked in companionable silence for a while, leaving the main street behind and following a path that led toward the edge of town. The mountains rose in the distance, majestic and eternal, and Eleanor could see why people came here despite the hardships. There was a raw beauty to this land that called to something deep inside her. "Can I ask you something?" Tom said finally. "Of course. That quilt you had when you arrived, it seems precious to you. Is there a story there?" Eleanor found herself telling him about her grandmother, about how the old woman had made the quilt when Eleanor's mother was born, piecing it together from scraps of family dresses and shirts. She said every piece had a memory stitched into it. "This blue was from my grandmother's wedding dress, that green from my grandfather's Sunday shirt. When my grandmother died, she left it to me. It is the only thing I have left of my family." Tom was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "My mother made me a quilt before I left Missouri. I still have it on my bed. Sometimes when I am lying there at night, I swear I can smell her lavender soap, just like when I was a kid. It is funny how something so simple can carry so much." "It is not simple, though," Eleanor said. "Not really. It is love made tangible. Every stitch is someone taking the time to create something beautiful and useful for someone they care about." "That is a nice way to put it," Tom smiled at her. "You have a poet's soul, Eleanor Hartwell," she laughed, surprising herself. "I do not think anyone has ever accused me of that before." Then they were not paying attention. They stood there on the edge of town, the wind cold but not bitter, the sun breaking through clouds to paint the snow-dusted prairie in shades of gold. Eleanor felt something shift inside her, a loosening of the tight control she had kept on her emotions for so long. It would be so easy to let herself feel something for this man, this kind cowboy who had shown her nothing but generosity and respect. But she was not sure she could afford to feel. Not yet. She had too much to prove, too much to build before she could think about opening her heart to anyone. "I should get back," she said reluctantly. "Abigail will need help with supper." "Of course." Tom walked her back to the boarding house, their shoulders occasionally brushing, each contact sending little sparks of awareness through Eleanor. At the door, he paused. "Would it be all right if I called on you again? Maybe took you for another walk next Sunday?" Eleanor knew she should say no, should keep her focus on work and survival. But she found herself nodding. "I would like that. Good, that is real good." Tom tipped his hat, that slow smile spreading across his face. "Until next Sunday then, Eleanor." She watched him walk away, then went inside, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. Abigail was in the kitchen and looked up with knowing eyes as Eleanor entered. "You were gone a while." "Tom showed me around town." "Did he now?" Abigail's tone was full of meaning. "Eleanor, I am going to give you some advice because I like you and I do not want to see you hurt. Tom Reed is a good man, one of the best, but he is also a man of means now. His ranch is successful, and there are plenty of women in this territory who would love to be Mrs. Tom Reed. If you are going to pursue something with him, you need to be sure of your feelings. Do not lead him on if you are just looking for security." Eleanor felt her cheeks burn. "I am not pursuing anything with him. He is just being friendly." "Maybe," Abigail said, "but I have seen the way he looks at you, and I saw the way you looked at him when you came back just now. I am not saying do not explore what might be there. I am just saying be honest about it with yourself and with him." Eleanor nodded slowly, taking the words to heart. She had never been a dishonest person, and she did not intend to start now. If something was going to develop between her and Tom, it would have to be built on truth and genuine feeling, not desperation or convenience. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm. Eleanor worked hard at the boarding house, learning Abigail's systems and routines, earning her $3 each week and carefully saving every penny. The other boarders grew accustomed to her presence, treating her with easy friendliness. She learned their names and preferences, who liked extra gravy, who wanted their coffee black, who needed their laundry done with extra care. And every Sunday, Tom came to town for church, and afterward they walked together. Sometimes they talked for hours, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes for the future. Other times they simply enjoyed the silence, comfortable in each other's presence. Tom told her about his ranch, about the challenges of running a cattle operation, about his dreams of expanding, maybe starting a horse breeding program. Eleanor told him about her childhood in Philadelphia, about nursing her parents through their final illnesses, about the fear and grief that had followed their deaths. She found herself able to speak of things she had never told anyone, her voice steady and calm in the cold winter air. "Do you miss the city?" Tom asked one Sunday in late February as they walked along a frozen creek bed. "Sometimes," Eleanor admitted. "I miss theaters and bookstores and the sound of carriages on cobblestones. But I do not miss feeling invisible. In Philadelphia, I was just another poor girl trying to survive. Here I am building something. People know my name, I matter." "You would have mattered anywhere," Tom said, "but I am glad you are here. Redemption is better with you in it." Such simple words, but they warmed Eleanor more than any fire could. She was growing to care for Tom, she realized, more than was probably wise. He was everything she had never thought to look for in a man, steady and kind and strong, with a gentle humor that made her laugh and a perceptiveness that saw through her careful defenses. But she was also aware of the gulf between them. Tom owned a ranch, had built a life of substance and success. She was a boarding house helper with 3 months of saved wages to her name. What could she possibly offer someone like him? In early March, a late winter storm swept through Wyoming, dropping 2 feet of snow and making the roads impassable. The boarding house was fuller than usual, travelers stranded by the weather, and Eleanor and Abigail worked around the clock to keep everyone fed and warm. On the third day of the storm, there was a pounding on the door. Abigail opened it to find Tom and another man, both covered in snow, supporting a third man between them who was clearly injured. "Abigail, we need help," Tom said urgently. "This is Billy Simmons, one of my ranch hands. His horse threw him and he hurt his leg bad. The roads are too dangerous to get him to Doc Carter's." "Can we bring him in?" "Of course, bring him to the downstairs room, the one by the kitchen. Eleanor, get hot water and clean cloths. Tom, send someone for the doctor, storm or no storm." That leg needs proper looking at. The next few hours passed in a blur. Doc Carter arrived on horseback, examined Billy's leg, and pronounced it badly broken but mendable. He set the bone while Billy gritted his teeth and gripped Eleanor's hand so hard she thought her fingers might break, then splinted the leg and gave instructions for care. Tom stayed to help, his presence calm and reassuring as they got Billy settled. The young cowboy, barely 20, was pale with pain and shock, but the doctor had given him laudanum and he finally fell into an uneasy sleep. "He will need to stay off that leg for at least 6 weeks, Doc Carter said, washing his hands at the kitchen pump. "Someone will need to tend him, make sure he does not try to walk on it too soon." "He can stay here," Abigail said. "We will look after him." "I will pay for his room and board," Tom added quickly, "and for the medical care. Billy works for me, this is my responsibility." After the doctor left, Tom sank into a chair at the kitchen table, exhaustion written in every line of his body. Eleanor poured him coffee and set a plate of food in front of him. "You should eat something." "Thank you." He took a few bites, then looked up at her. "You were good with Billy, calm under pressure." Not many women could have held steady like that while the doc was setting his leg. "I nursed my parents through their illnesses," Eleanor said quietly. "I have seen pain before. I learned to put my own feelings aside and just do what needs to be done. That is a hard lesson to learn." Tom reached out and gently took her hand, examining her fingers where Billy had gripped them. There were red marks, the beginning of bruises. "He hurt you." "I will heal." It was nothing compared to what he was going through. Tom did not let go of her hand. His thumb traced gentle circles over her bruised fingers, and Eleanor's breath caught at the tenderness of the gesture. They were alone in the kitchen, Abigail having gone upstairs to check on the other boarders, and the intimacy of the moment felt charged with possibility. "Eleanor," Tom said quietly, "I want to tell you something, and I hope you will not think I am being too forward. These past few months, getting to know you, it has been the best part of my days. I find myself looking for excuses to come to town, just hoping I might catch a glimpse of you. When I am out working the ranch, I am thinking about what I will tell you on Sunday, what stories might make you laugh." Eleanor's heart was racing. "Tom, I know it has not been long," he continued. "And I know you came here to build a life for yourself, not to be swept into some cowboy's plans, but I cannot keep pretending this is just a friendship. I have feelings for you, Eleanor, real feelings. And if you feel even a fraction of that in return, I would like to court you properly. I would like to see where this might go." Eleanor looked at their joined hands at this good man who was offering her his heart. Every logical part of her brain screamed that it was too soon, too risky, that she should protect herself. But her heart, that traitorous organ, was singing with joy. "I have feelings for you too," she whispered. "I have been trying not to, trying to be practical, but I do. When you are gone, I count the days until Sunday. When you are near, everything feels brighter, more possible." Tom's face transformed with hope and happiness. "Then let me court you. Let me do this right. I want to take you to dances and church socials. I want everyone in Redemption to know that I am trying to win your heart. And Eleanor, I want you to know something else. I do not care that you came here with nothing. I do not care about your circumstances. What I care about is the person you are, the strength and kindness and intelligence I see in you. Those things matter so much more than money or position. But Tom, what can I offer you? You have built this successful ranch, and I have nothing but a worn quilt and 3 months of saved wages. You have yourself, Tom said simply. That is everything. Eleanor, I am not looking for a wife to bring me wealth or status. I am looking for a partner, someone to build a life with. Someone who will stand beside me through the hard times and celebrate the good times. I think you could be that person. I hope you could be. Eleanor felt tears slide down her cheeks, tears of relief and hope, and something that felt dangerously close to love. I would like that very much. Tom stood and pulled her gently to her feet, then cupped her face in his rough, work-worn hands. May I kiss you? She nodded, unable to speak, and Tom leaned down and kissed her softly. His lips were gentle, questioning, and Eleanor responded with all the pent-up longing and hope she had been holding inside. The kiss deepened, and Eleanor felt like she was falling and flying at the same time, every nerve in her body alive with sensation. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Tom rested his forehead against hers. I have been wanting to do that since the first moment I saw you on that platform, looking so lost and brave at the same time. I am glad you did, Eleanor said, smiling through her tears. I have been wanting you to. They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, until Abigail's footsteps on the stairs made them step apart. But the older woman took one look at their faces and smiled knowingly. About time you two figured things out, she said. Now, Tom Reed, you should be getting back to your ranch before the storm picks up again. Eleanor has work to do. Tom laughed. Yes, ma'am, Eleanor, I will be back as soon as the road's clear. We will do this properly. I will talk to Abigail about when I can call on you. After he left, Eleanor moved through the rest of her chores in a daze. Everything looked different, felt different. The world had shifted on its axis, and she had shifted with it. Tom Reed was courting her, he had kissed her, he had feelings for her. Do not get too dreamy-eyed, Abigail warned, but her tone was affectionate. You still have a living to earn, and Billy Simmons will need tending, but Eleanor, I am happy for you. Tom is a good man, and you deserve something good after all you have been through. Over the following weeks, as winter slowly released its grip and the first hints of spring appeared, Tom courted Eleanor with old-fashioned propriety. He came to town twice a week, always bringing small gifts, a book he thought she might enjoy, a hair ribbon the color of her eyes, wildflowers from the prairie. They sat in Abigail's parlor with the door properly open, talking for hours while Abigail chaperoned from her rocking chair. Tom told Eleanor about his dreams for the ranch, his plans to expand the herd, his hope to eventually build a larger house. The cabin I live in now is functional but not much more, he admitted. I always thought when I found the right woman, I would build her a proper home. Something with a real kitchen and a porch where we could sit in the evenings. Maybe a room for a library since you love books so much. That sounds wonderful, Eleanor said, her heart aching with longing. It was becoming harder and harder to remember why she should be cautious, why she should protect her heart. Tom made her feel safe and valued and desired, and she was falling in love with him more deeply each day. Billy Simmons recovered slowly under Eleanor's care. She changed his bandages, brought him meals, read to him when he was bored and restless. The young cowboy became fiercely loyal to her, praising her to anyone who would listen. That Miss Hartwell is an angel, he told Tom one afternoon when the rancher came to check on him. She has got healing hands and a kind heart. You better marry her quick before some other fellow realizes what a treasure she is. Tom just smiled. I am working on it, Billy. In late April, when the prairie had turned green with spring grass and wildflowers dotted the hillsides, Tom asked Eleanor to come see his ranch. Abigail gave her permission, insisting that she would come along as chaperone, though her rheumatism had been acting up and the long ride would be difficult. "I will behave myself, Abigail," Tom promised. "I just want Eleanor to see the place, to understand what I am offering if she agrees to marry me." Eleanor's breath caught. "Tom, you have not asked me to marry you." "Not officially, no, but that is where this is heading, is it not? I want to marry you, Eleanor. I want you to be my wife. But I want you to see what that life would be like first. I want you to make an informed decision." So on a beautiful Sunday morning, with Abigail squeezed into the wagon beside them, they rode out to Tom's ranch. It was 5 miles north of town, tucked into a valley with a creek running through it and mountains rising in the distance. The ranch house was small, as Tom had said, but it was well built and tidy, with a barn and several outbuildings. "I have got 40 head of cattle now," Tom explained as they toured the property. "And 3 horses besides my own. The land is good grazing, plenty of water. I have got 2 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse over there. It is not much yet, but it is growing." Eleanor looked around at the vast open spaces, the endless sky, the mountains standing sentinel in the distance. It was so different from the crowded streets of Philadelphia, the narrow boarding house room she called home. This was space and freedom and possibility. "It is beautiful, Tom. Come see where I would build the new house," he said, leading her up a small rise. From here, the view was spectacular. The entire valley spread below them, the creek glinting in the sunlight. "I always thought this would be the perfect spot. Far enough from the working areas to have privacy, but close enough to keep an eye on things. What do you think?" Eleanor could picture it, a home with wide windows to let in the light, a porch where they could watch the sunset, room for children to run and play. Children. The thought made her heart skip. She wanted that, she realized. She wanted a life with Tom, wanted to build something lasting and real with this good man who loved her. "I think it would be perfect," she said softly. Tom took her hand. "Eleanor Hartwell, I know we have not known each other long. By some standards, this is all moving too fast, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you face challenges head on. I love how you laugh and how you think and how you make me want to be a better man. I want to build a life with you, right here on this spot. I want to give you a home, a real home, not just a room in a boarding house. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want children with you, a future with you. Will you marry me?" Eleanor looked at this man, this wonderful, unexpected gift that had come into her life when she had nothing. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, about stepping off that train with only a worn quilt to her name. She had been so afraid, so lost, and Tom had been the first person to show her kindness. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Tom, I will marry you." Tom let out a whoop of joy and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until they were both dizzy and laughing. Abigail, who had been discreetly watching from the wagon, called out her congratulations. They were married 6 weeks later, on a warm June day with the whole town of Redemption in attendance. Eleanor wore a simple white dress that Abigail and several of the town women had helped her sew, and she carried wildflowers from the prairie. Tom wore a new suit and looked so handsome that Eleanor's heart hurt with happiness. The ceremony was held in the little whitewashed church, and Eleanor walked down the aisle alone with no father to give her away. But she did not feel alone. The entire community had embraced her, and faces turned to smile at her with genuine warmth. When she reached the front, Tom took her hand, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You are beautiful," he whispered. The minister spoke about love and commitment and the sanctity of marriage. He talked about how marriage was a partnership, 2 people choosing to face life's challenges together. Eleanor listened with her hand clasped in Tom's, feeling the rightness of this moment deep in her bones. Do you, Thomas Reed, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do, Tom said firmly. And do you, Eleanor Hartwell, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? Eleanor looked into Tom's eyes and saw her entire future reflected there. I do. Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Tom, you may kiss your bride. Tom cupped Eleanor's face in his hands, just as he had that first time in Abigail's kitchen, and kissed her with all the love and promise of their future. The church erupted in applause, and when they finally pulled apart, both laughing, they turned to face their community as Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Reed. The reception was held at the boarding house, which Abigail had decorated with wildflowers and ribbons. There was food and music and dancing, the entire town celebrating with them. Eleanor danced with Tom, with Billy Simmons, who was walking well now, with several of the other ranch hands who had become friends. She was passed from partner to partner, always laughing, always aware of Tom's eyes following her around the room with love and pride. As evening fell and the party began to wind down, Tom came to claim her for one last dance. They swayed together, wrapped in each other's arms, and Tom whispered in her ear, "Ready to go home, Mrs. Reed, home." The word sent shivers of anticipation and joy through Eleanor. "Yes, I am ready." They said their goodbyes, accepting congratulations and teasing in equal measure, then climbed into Tom's wagon for the ride out to the ranch. Someone had tied tin cans to the back, which rattled and clanged until Tom stopped to cut them loose, both of them laughing. The ranch looked beautiful in the twilight, lamplight glowing from the cabin windows. Tom had clearly prepared for this moment. When he opened the door, Eleanor gasped. The small cabin had been cleaned and decorated, wildflowers in jars on every surface, a new quilt on the bed, a rocking chair by the fireplace. "Tom, it is beautiful." "I wanted you to feel at home here," he said, looking almost shy. "I know it is not much, and it is not the house I promised you, but I will build that house, Eleanor. I swear I will give you the home you deserve." Eleanor turned to face him, placing her hands on his chest. "Tom, you already have. Do you not see? You gave me a home the moment you found me on that platform. You looked at a woman with nothing but a worn quilt, and you saw someone worth helping, worth knowing, worth loving. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me a future when I thought I had lost everything. This cabin, that house you will build, those are just buildings. You are my home." Tom's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I love you so much, Eleanor. I love you too. Now kiss me, husband, and take me to bed." Their wedding night was everything Eleanor had hoped for, tender and passionate and full of whispered promises. Tom was gentle with her inexperience, patient and loving, and Eleanor gave herself to him completely, holding nothing back. This was what she had been waiting for her whole life, this connection, this love, this sense of belonging. Afterward, they lay tangled together under the new quilt, and Eleanor suddenly thought of something. "Tom, wait here." She slipped out of bed, unself-conscious in her nakedness, and retrieved something from her bag. When she returned, she was carrying her grandmother's worn quilt. "I want this on our bed," she said. "The new quilt is beautiful, but this one is family. This one has history and love stitched into every piece. I want our life together to include the past that made me who I am." Tom's expression was tender as he helped her spread the old quilt over the new one. "I think that is perfect. And someday, when we have children, we will tell them the story of how their mother came west with nothing but this quilt, and how I knew from the first moment that she was the bravest, most beautiful woman I had ever seen." They settled back into bed, wrapped in both quilts, wrapped in each other. "Tell me about the house you want to build," Eleanor murmured sleepily. And so Tom painted pictures with words, describing a home with a wide porch and big windows, a kitchen with a modern stove and plenty of workspace, a parlor with built-in bookshelves, bedrooms for children. Eleanor listened, adding her own ideas, and together they designed their future in whispers and dreams. The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Eleanor had to learn the rhythms of ranch life, so different from the structured days at the boarding house. She cooked for Tom and the ranch hands, kept the cabin clean, tended a vegetable garden Tom helped her plant. She learned to ride a horse, though she was never entirely comfortable with it, and she learned to read the sky for signs of coming weather. But she also discovered joys she had never imagined. The freedom of walking out her door into open prairie, the satisfaction of growing her own food, the pleasure of cooking for people who appreciated her efforts. She loved the quiet evenings with Tom, sitting on the small porch and watching the sun set over the mountains, talking about their days and their dreams. And she loved being a wife. Not just the physical intimacy, though that continued to be a source of wonder and pleasure, but the partnership of it. Tom treated her as an equal, asking her opinion on ranch matters, listening to her ideas. When she suggested they could make extra money by selling eggs if they increased the chicken flock, he immediately agreed and helped her build a larger coop. When she mentioned missing books, he surprised her with a subscription to a mail-order library. In the fall, Tom began building the new house. He hired a crew from town, but he worked alongside them every day, determined to have a hand in creating their home. Eleanor watched the structure rise from the ground, walls and roof and windows, her heart full of wonder. This was theirs, built with Tom's labor and their shared dreams. By winter, the house was finished enough to move into, though interior work continued. It was everything they had imagined and more, spacious and full of light, with a kitchen that made Eleanor want to sing, and a parlor with those built-in bookshelves Tom had promised. They moved in just before Christmas, and Eleanor spent days arranging their few possessions, making the space feel like home. On Christmas Eve, they sat before the fireplace in their new parlor, and Tom handed Eleanor a package. Inside was a new quilt, this one made from fabric Tom had ordered specially, beautiful blues and greens that reminded Eleanor of her grandmother's quilt. "I asked some of the women in town to help me make it," Tom admitted. "I wanted you to have something new for our new house, but I also wanted it to echo the quilt you brought with you. That quilt represents your past, your family. This one represents our future, our family. Someday we will have children, and they will have both quilts, both stories." Eleanor could not speak through her tears. She simply held the quilt, and then held Tom, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness, his understanding of what mattered to her. "I have something for you too," she managed finally, pulling away to hand him a package of her own. Inside was a shirt she had sewn, made from soft flannel in a deep blue that matched his eyes. "It is not much compared to what you gave me." "It is perfect," Tom said, holding the shirt up. "You made this with your own hands just for me. That makes it precious." They made love that night on the floor in front of the fireplace, both new quilts spread beneath them, and Eleanor had never felt so completely happy, so utterly at home in her own skin and in her life. The months turned into a year, then two. The ranch prospered under Tom's management and Eleanor's support. They added more cattle, expanded the horse breeding program Tom had dreamed of, built additional outbuildings. Eleanor became known throughout the territory for her cooking, and she occasionally took orders for baked goods from town, adding to their savings. And in the spring of their third year of marriage, Eleanor realized she was carrying their first child. The joy on Tom's face when she told him was something she would remember for the rest of her life. He became impossibly protective, insisting she rest more, take on less work, though Eleanor felt perfectly fine. "I am pregnant, not fragile," she protested. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Not my woman carrying my baby," Tom countered. "I will not take any chances with either of you." Their son was born in October of 1887, during an early snowstorm that kept Doc Carter at the ranch for 2 days. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Eleanor was not sure she would survive it. But Tom held her hand through every contraction, wiped her face with cool cloths, whispered encouragements when she wanted to give up. And then suddenly there was a baby, a squalling, red-faced, perfect baby boy. Doc Carter placed him in Eleanor's arms, and she looked down at her son with wonder. He had Tom's strong chin and her nose, and when he opened his eyes, they were dark blue and full of mystery. "He is perfect," Tom breathed, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "You are perfect. Eleanor, you are the strongest, most amazing woman in the world." They named him James after Tom's father, and he became the center of their world. Eleanor had never known she could love anyone as much as she loved this child, this little life she and Tom had created together. Tom was a devoted father, coming in from ranch work to hold his son, singing off-key lullabies, marveling at every tiny change and development. "He smiled at me today," Tom would announce proudly. "I swear he recognized my voice." Eleanor would laugh and remind him that babies did not really smile until they were older, but secretly she thought James knew exactly who his father was and adored him already. When James was 6 months old, Abigail came to visit, bringing news from town and gifts for the baby. She sat in Eleanor's beautiful kitchen, drinking tea and admiring the home Eleanor and Tom had built. "You have done well for yourself," the older woman said approvingly. "I remember the day you arrived in Redemption, looking so lost and scared with nothing but that quilt. Look at you now. A fine home, a good man, a beautiful baby. You have built a real life here." "I could not have done it without you," Eleanor said sincerely. "You gave me a chance when I had nothing, and you introduced me to Tom. I owe you everything, Abigail." "You do not owe me anything. You earned every bit of this through your own hard work and good character. I just opened a door. You are the one who walked through it." That night, after Abigail had gone back to town and James was asleep in his cradle, Eleanor and Tom sat on their porch, wrapped in blankets against the cool evening air. Eleanor leaned against Tom's shoulder, completely content. "Do you ever think about how we met?" she asked. "About how different everything could have been?" "All the time," Tom admitted. "If I had not been in town that day, if I had not seen you on that platform, if you had gotten directions from someone else, and we had never crossed paths again. It terrifies me how easily we might have missed each other. But we did not miss each other. You found me and you kept finding me until I could not imagine my life without you in it." Tom kissed the top of her head. "I will keep finding you, Eleanor. Every day for the rest of our lives I will choose you, choose us, choose this life we are building together." As the stars came out over the prairie, Eleanor thought about her journey. She had arrived in Redemption with nothing but a worn quilt and a desperate hope for survival. Tom had looked at her and seen not her poverty or her desperation, but her potential. He had offered her not just help, but a home. And in accepting that offer, in trusting this kind cowboy with her battered heart, Eleanor had found more than she had ever dreamed possible. The years flowed by like the creek that ran through their property, steady and life-giving. James grew from a baby into a toddler, then a sturdy little boy who loved following his father around the ranch. When he was 3, Eleanor gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, with her mother's blue eyes and a temperament as sunny as a summer day. The ranch continued to prosper. Tom's reputation for breeding quality horses spread throughout Wyoming and beyond, and buyers came from as far as Colorado to purchase his stock. Eleanor managed the household with calm efficiency, raised their children with patience and love, and became known throughout the territory as a woman of grace and intelligence. But it was not always easy. There were hard years when drought killed the grass and they lost cattle. There was the winter when Rose fell ill with scarlet fever and Eleanor, and Tom took turns sitting by her bedside for weeks, terrified they would lose her. There were disagreements and struggles, moments when the weight of ranch life and parenthood felt overwhelming. Through it all, they held on to each other. When times were hard, they faced the challenges together. When they argued, they worked through it and came out stronger on the other side. When joy came, they celebrated together, whether it was a successful cattle sale or James learning to ride his first horse or Rose speaking her first words. And always, on their bed, were 2 quilts. The worn one that Eleanor had brought west with her, growing even more faded with the years but still precious, and the newer one Tom had given her that first Christmas in their house. They became part of the family story, tangible links between past and future. When James was 7 and Rose was 4, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the others, and Doc Carter warned her to take it easy. Tom hired help for the house, insisting Eleanor rest, and she chafed at the restrictions but obeyed for the sake of the baby. Their second son was born in the spring of 1894, a big, healthy boy they named William. He had Tom's dark hair and a pair of lungs that made sure everyone knew when he was hungry or upset. James and Rose were fascinated by their baby brother, wanting to help with every aspect of his care. "We have a full house now," Tom said, holding William while Eleanor recovered. "3 beautiful children, a successful ranch, and the love of my life by my side. I could not ask for more." But life had more to give them. As the children grew, the ranch grew with them. They added more land, built additional structures, hired more hands. Tom taught James everything about ranching, and the boy proved to be a natural, inheriting his father's patience with animals and his mother's quick mind. Rose was different from James, more interested in books and music than cattle and horses, but she loved the ranch in her own way, finding beauty in the landscape and joy in the wide open spaces. She also inherited Eleanor's talent for cooking, and by the time she was 10, she could make biscuits that rivaled her mother's. William was the wild one, always getting into mischief, always pushing boundaries, but with such charm that it was hard to stay angry with him. He kept them all laughing and occasionally terrified, like the time he decided to ride a bull calf and ended up in the water trough. Through it all, Eleanor and Tom's love deepened and matured. The passionate urgency of their early days together evolved into something richer and more complex, a love built on shared history and weathered storms, on inside jokes and comfortable silences, on knowing glances across crowded rooms and gentle touches in the night. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Tom surprised Eleanor with a trip to Denver. It was her first time in a real city since leaving Philadelphia, and Eleanor was overwhelmed by the noise and crowds. But Tom had planned everything carefully, taking her to the theater and fancy restaurants, buying her a beautiful dress and a pair of pearl earrings. "You have given me 10 years of happiness," he said as they dressed for the theater on their last night in Denver. "You have given me 3 incredible children and a home that is truly a home. You have stood by me through droughts and hard winters, and all the challenges of building a life in this territory. I wanted to give you something special, something that showed you how much I appreciate everything you are." Eleanor looked at herself in the mirror of their hotel room, wearing the new dress with its fashionable bustle and the pearl earrings glowing against her skin. She looked prosperous and elegant, nothing like the desperate young woman who had stepped off the train in redemption with only a worn quilt to her name. "Do you remember what you said to me the first time I told you I loved you?" she asked Tom. "I said I would give you a home. You gave me more than a home, Tom. You gave me a life. You gave me hope and purpose and love. You gave me our children and this beautiful life we have built. That is worth more than any dress or earring or fancy trip. Though I admit, the trip has been wonderful." Tom came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "We gave each other those things. You worked just as hard as I did to build what we have. You are my partner in every sense of the word." They went to the theater and watched a Shakespeare play, holding hands in the darkness like young lovers. Afterward, they walked back to their hotel through the gaslit streets, talking about everything and nothing, simply enjoying being alone together without children or ranch responsibilities. But as much as Eleanor enjoyed the trip, she was happy to return home. The ranch was where she belonged now, where her heart lived. The mountains and prairie had become as familiar to her as the city streets of her childhood had once been, and she could not imagine living anywhere else. The children greeted their return with shrieks of joy, full of stories about everything that had happened while they were gone. The ranch hands had kept everything running smoothly, but it was clear they were glad to have the boss and his wife back. That night, after the children were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Eleanor and Tom sat in their room, both quilts spread across the bed. Eleanor traced the patterns of her grandmother's quilt, thinking about how far she had come. "Do you ever regret it?" Tom asked. "Leaving Philadelphia, coming west. You could have had an easier life in the city." "Not for a moment," Eleanor said honestly. "I never really lived in Philadelphia. I just existed, going through the motions of survival. Here with you, I am truly alive. Every day means something. Every challenge we face together. Every joy we experience, we share. This is the life I was meant to have, even if I did not know it when I was standing on that train platform." Tom pulled her close. "I think about that day sometimes, about how close I came to not going into town. I almost sent one of the hands instead, but something told me I needed to go myself. I think maybe it was fate bringing us together." "Maybe it was," Eleanor agreed, "or maybe it was just luck. Either way, I am grateful for it every single day." The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of their children's lives. James grew into a capable young man, taking on more and more responsibility on the ranch, proving he had the skills and temperament to one day run it himself. Rose discovered a talent for teaching and began giving lessons to younger children in Redemption, riding into town twice a week with Eleanor. William remained the wild card, equally likely to do something brilliantly clever or frustratingly reckless. He had Tom's charm and Eleanor's intelligence, a dangerous combination that kept them all on their toes. In 1900, as a new century dawned, Tom and Eleanor stood on their porch and looked out over the ranch they had built together. 17 years had passed since that January day when Eleanor arrived in Redemption with nothing but a quilt. Now their land stretched farther than the eye could see, dotted with cattle and horses, marked by sturdy buildings and good fences. "Do you remember when this was just 40 acres and a dream?" Tom asked, his arm around Eleanor's waist. "I remember when it was your dream and I was just along for the ride," Eleanor said with a smile. "It was always our dream," Tom corrected. "From the moment you said yes to me, it became ours. Everything we have built, we built together." James, now 17 and nearly as tall as his father, came riding in from checking the fence line. Rose, 15 and beautiful, sat at the kitchen table working on lesson plans for her students. William, 12 and still growing, was supposed to be doing chores but was instead attempting to train a half-wild barn cat. This was their life, chaotic and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. Eleanor looked at her family, at the home they had created, and felt a contentment so deep, it was almost painful. That summer, Billy Simmons, the ranch hand who had broken his leg all those years ago, got married. He had never left Tom's employment, becoming the foreman and Tom's right-hand man. The wedding was held at the ranch, and as Eleanor watched Billy dance with his new bride, she thought about her own wedding day, about how young and hopeful she and Tom had been. "We were about their age when we married," Tom said, echoing her thoughts. "We were younger," Eleanor corrected, "and we knew each other for 6 months before you proposed." "Long enough to know what I wanted. I have never regretted acting quickly, have you?" "Never, not for one single moment." The next few years brought changes. James, at 20, fell in love with a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property, and they married in a ceremony that was the social event of the season. Eleanor watched her eldest son make his vows, remembering her own wedding, and felt the bittersweet joy of watching a child step into adulthood. Rose announced her intention to attend college in Denver, wanting to become a proper teacher. Tom was hesitant, worried about his daughter living in the city alone, but Eleanor convinced him to let her go. "She needs to find her own path, just like I found mine." "We cannot protect her from life, Tom. We can only prepare her for it." So Rose left for Denver, and the house felt emptier without her sunny presence, though she wrote long letters every week describing her classes and her new friends. Eleanor missed her daughter desperately, but was proud of her courage in pursuing her dreams. William, at 17, announced he had no interest in ranching or teaching or any conventional profession. He wanted to travel, to see the world beyond Wyoming's borders. This time it was Eleanor who struggled to let go, remembering her own desperate journey west, terrified of what dangers might await her youngest child. "He needs to find his path too," Tom reminded her gently, using her own words. "We raised him to be independent and brave. We cannot be surprised when he acts on those traits." So they let William go, watching him ride off toward his own adventures with a mixture of pride and terror. The house felt too quiet, with only James and his wife living in the foreman's cabin and Tom and Eleanor rattling around in the big house. But they were not alone for long. James and his wife gave them their first grandchild, a boy they named Thomas after his grandfather. Holding the tiny baby, Eleanor felt the circle of life completing itself. She had come west with nothing, had built a life and a family, and now that family was expanding into another generation. "We are grandparents," Tom marveled, holding little Thomas with the same wonder he had shown when holding his own children. "When did we get old enough to be grandparents?" "Speak for yourself," Eleanor said with a laugh. "I am still young and vibrant," but there was truth in Tom's words. They were older now, both in their 50s, with gray threading through their hair and lines marking their faces. The years had left their mark, in aching joints and tired eyes, in memories that sometimes faded and names that occasionally escaped them. But they were healthy and active, still running the ranch together, still making plans for the future. Tom had started teaching James the business side of ranching, preparing him to eventually take over. Eleanor had started writing down her recipes and techniques, creating a cookbook for Rose and any future daughters or granddaughters. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Tom said suddenly, "I want to take you on a trip." "We just got back from Denver last year," Eleanor protested. "No, I mean a real trip." "Back to Philadelphia. I want to see where you came from, want to understand that part of your life. And I thought maybe you would like to see it again, see how far you have come." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, considering. She had not been back to Philadelphia since leaving in 1884, almost 25 years ago. The city of her childhood existed now only in memory, and she was not sure she wanted to confront those memories with the reality of what the place had become. But there was something appealing about the idea too. She could show Tom the streets where she had played as a child, the boarding house where she had lived with her parents, the train station where her desperate journey had begun. She could see it all through new eyes, with the perspective of time and experience and success. "All right," she said finally. "Let us go to Philadelphia, let us close that circle." They made the trip in the spring of 1908. The journey was easier now than it had been in Eleanor's youth. The trains were faster and more comfortable, and they could afford first-class tickets and good hotels. Eleanor spent the journey looking out the window, watching the landscape change from prairie to farmland to industrial cities, remembering her earlier passage in reverse. Philadelphia was both familiar and strange. The streets she remembered had changed, new buildings rising where old ones had been, more cars and fewer horses, electric lights replacing gas lamps. But the bones of the city were the same, and Eleanor found herself able to navigate based on old memories. They visited the boarding house where she had lived, now under different management, and Eleanor told Tom stories of her life there, of nursing her parents, of the fear and grief that had consumed her after their deaths. They walked past the church where her parents were buried, and Eleanor placed flowers on their graves, introducing Tom to the parents he had never met. "I wish they could have known you," she said softly. "They would have loved you. My father would have respected your work ethic and integrity. My mother would have adored your kindness." "I wish I could have known them too," Tom said. "They raised an incredible daughter. That is a legacy to be proud of." They spent a week in Philadelphia, touring museums and theaters, eating in fine restaurants, experiencing all the culture and sophistication the city had to offer. It was enjoyable, but by the end of the week, both Eleanor and Tom were ready to go home. On their last evening, they took a carriage to the train station where Eleanor had begun her journey west. It looked different now, modernized and expanded, but Eleanor could still remember standing on the platform with her carpetbag, terrified and alone. "I was so scared," she said quietly, holding Tom's hand. "I had no idea what was waiting for me, no idea if I would even survive the journey. I remember thinking that maybe it would be better if I did not, if something happened, and I did not have to face another day of struggling and failing." Tom squeezed her hand tightly. "I am so grateful you survived. I am grateful for every choice you made that brought you to me." "So am I," Eleanor said. "Standing here now, knowing everything that was waiting for me in redemption, all the joy and love and life I was going to have, if I could go back and tell that scared young woman what was coming, I do not think she would believe me." "But she would have hoped it was true," Tom said. "Because hope is what kept her going, kept her moving forward even when everything seemed impossible." They returned to Wyoming with a renewed appreciation for the life they had built. Philadelphia was impressive and exciting, but it was not home. Home was their ranch, the mountains and prairie, the community of redemption that had become family. James and his wife had given them a second grandchild while they were gone, a daughter this time, and Rose had come home from Denver for the summer, bringing a young man she was clearly serious about. William had written from California, where he was working on a shipping crew, full of stories about the ocean and foreign ports. Life continued its steady rhythm. More grandchildren came, as James and Rose both married and started families. William eventually returned to Wyoming, not to ranch but to start a freight business, hauling goods between Redemption and larger cities. He married a schoolteacher from Denver, and they settled in Redemption, adding to the growing family. In 1915, Eleanor and Tom celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a party that lasted 2 days, filled with food and music and laughter. Looking around at the huge family that had grown from just the two of them, Eleanor felt overwhelmed with gratitude. The house Tom had built for her had been expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family, but one room remained unchanged. Their bedroom still held the same furniture, the same bed, and spread across that bed were the two quilts that had been there from the beginning. Her grandmother's quilt was in fragile condition now, the fabric worn thin in places, some of the seams splitting. Eleanor had carefully mended it multiple times, but she knew it would not last forever. The quilt Tom had given her was showing wear too, faded from years of use and washing. "We should probably retire these quilts," Tom said one night, examining the worn fabric. "Put them somewhere safe before they fall apart completely." "Not yet," Eleanor said. "They still have some life in them, just like us." Tom laughed and pulled her close. They were older now, both past 60, moving slower than they once had. Tom's joints ached in cold weather, and Eleanor's hands were gnarled with arthritis. But they were still together, still in love, still facing each day as partners. "Do you remember when I proposed to you?" Tom asked. "When I promised to build you a home?" "I remember," Eleanor said. "You said you would give me a whole home, and you kept that promise, Tom. You gave me more than a building. You gave me a life full of love and purpose and joy." "We gave that to each other," Tom corrected, as he always did. "Everything we have, we built together." And it was true. Their life had been a partnership in every sense, each supporting the other through challenges, celebrating victories together, making decisions as a team. They had raised children and built a successful ranch, and created a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. As they grew older, they gradually stepped back from the daily operation of the ranch, letting James take over more and more. It was hard to let go, to accept that their time of active leadership was passing, but it was also satisfying to see their son step into the role with confidence and skill. "He is a better rancher than I ever was," Tom said proudly, watching James work with a difficult horse. "He had a good teacher," Eleanor replied, "and he has your patience and integrity. The ranch will be in good hands." They spent more time just enjoying life, taking walks around the property, playing with grandchildren, sitting on the porch and watching the sunset. Eleanor finally finished her cookbook and had it published, a collection of recipes and stories from her years in Wyoming. It became surprisingly popular, especially among women in isolated ranching communities who were hungry for connection and practical advice. Tom finally built the library Eleanor had always wanted, a room lined floor to ceiling with books, with comfortable chairs and good light for reading. They spent winter evenings there together, Tom reading newspapers and ranch journals while Eleanor lost herself in novels. In 1920, on a beautiful spring day, they received word that Abigail had passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was 93 years old and had run her boarding house right up until the end. Eleanor wept for the woman who had given her a chance when she had nothing, who had become a surrogate mother and dear friend. At the funeral, Eleanor spoke about what Abigail had meant to her. She saw potential in a desperate young woman with nothing but a worn quilt. She gave me work and dignity and a place to belong. She introduced me to my husband and supported us as we built our life together. Everything I have, everything I am, started with her kindness. The world is a poorer place without her. That night, Eleanor and Tom looked through old photographs, remembering their early days in redemption. There was one of Eleanor at the boarding house, young and serious in her gray work dress. Another of their wedding day, both of them glowing with happiness. Pictures of the children at various ages, of the ranch buildings being constructed, of family gatherings and celebrations. "We have had a good life," Tom said quietly, "better than I ever dreamed possible." "So have I," Eleanor agreed, "and it is not over yet. We still have time, still have each other." But time was running out, though neither wanted to acknowledge it. Tom's heart had been giving him trouble, and despite Doc Carter's warnings to take it easy, he refused to fully retire. "I am a rancher," he said stubbornly. I will die a rancher, not an invalid sitting in a chair. Eleanor tried not to worry, but she could not help noticing how he tired more easily, how he sometimes pressed a hand to his chest and took slow, careful breaths. She stayed close, watching him with fear in her heart, terrified of losing him. In the fall of 1922, Tom had a heart attack while working with the horses. James was with him and got him back to the house, where Eleanor and the doctor did everything they could, but it was clear Tom was dying. He lingered for 3 days, drifting in and out of consciousness, and Eleanor never left his side. On the 3rd day, he opened his eyes and saw her there, holding his hand. "Eleanor," he whispered. "I am here," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I am right here, Tom. Best thing I ever did was find you on that platform," he said, his voice weak but clear. "Best decision I ever made was loving you." "Loving you was the best decision I ever made too," Eleanor said. "You gave me everything, Tom, everything that mattered." "No regrets?" he asked. "Not a single one. Every moment with you was a gift." Tom smiled, that slow, sweet smile she had fallen in love with all those years ago. "Good, that is good." "Eleanor, I want you to promise me something. Anything. Do not mourn too long. You have got years left in you, and I want you to live them fully. Keep writing, keep being with the grandchildren, keep finding joy. Promise me." "I promise," Eleanor whispered, though she could not imagine finding joy without him. "I love you," Tom said. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," Eleanor said. "Forever." Tom's eyes closed, and a few minutes later he drew his last breath with Eleanor's hand in his. She sat there holding him as the light faded from the windows, unable to let go, unable to accept that he was really gone. The funeral was huge, the church packed with people whose lives Tom had touched. Cowboys and ranchers, townspeople and family, all came to pay their respects to a man who had lived his life with integrity and kindness. Eleanor stood straight and dignified through the service, her children on either side of her, drawing strength from their presence. They buried Tom on the ranch, on the hill where he had proposed to Eleanor all those years ago, the spot where he had dreamed of building their house. From his grave, you could see the entire valley, the ranch he had built, the home he had created. Eleanor visited the grave every day, sometimes talking to Tom about the ranch or the family, sometimes just sitting in silence. The grief was overwhelming, a physical ache that never quite went away, but she kept her promise. She kept living. She spent time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories of their grandfather, of the Wild West days when redemption was just a small frontier town. She finished another cookbook and started writing a memoir, wanting to preserve the story of her journey west and the life she had built with Tom. On cold nights, she slept under both quilts, her grandmother's and the one Tom had given her, and she felt surrounded by love, past and present intertwined. The quilts were fragile now, barely holding together, but she could not bear to put them away. Eleanor lived for another 8 years after Tom's death, years filled with both sadness and joy. She saw more grandchildren born, attended more weddings and celebrations. She watched the ranch continue to prosper under James's management, saw her children and grandchildren living good, productive lives. And she wrote. She wrote about her journey west with nothing but a quilt, about a cowboy who had promised her a home and kept that promise in ways she could never have imagined. She wrote about love and loss, hardship and triumph, about building a life in the Wild West. Her memoir was published shortly before her death and became a testament to the strength of pioneer women and the power of love to transform lives. In the spring of 1930, Eleanor's health began to fail. She was 71 years old, had lived a full and meaningful life, but her body was ready to rest. Her children gathered at the ranch, filling the house with love and noise and memories. On her last day, Eleanor asked to be moved to the bedroom she had shared with Tom. They placed her in the bed, covered her with both quilts, and she smiled. "I am ready," she told her children. "I have had a wonderful life, full of more love than any one person deserves. And soon I will see your father again. That is all I want now." Rose held her hand. "Mother, what do you want us to do with the quilts?" Eleanor looked at the worn, precious fabric. "Give my grandmother's quilt to James for the ranch. It represents where I came from, the journey that brought me here. Give the quilt your father made me to Rose for the family. It represents what we built together. And tell your children and their children that these quilts are more than just fabric and thread. They are symbols of hope and love and the courage to start over. They are reminders that sometimes we arrive with nothing, and sometimes someone sees our worth anyway and gives us everything." As the sun set over the mountains, Eleanor closed her eyes. Her last thought was of Tom, of that first moment she had seen him on the platform in Redemption, offering help to a stranger. She had brought nothing but a worn quilt on the train, and the cowboy had given her a whole home. And in return, she had given him her heart, her life, her everything. And it had been enough. More than enough. It had been everything. Eleanor passed peacefully, surrounded by family, leaving behind a legacy of love and strength that would endure for generations. They buried her next to Tom on the hill, and if you stood there on a quiet evening, you could almost hear their voices carried on the wind, still talking, still laughing, still together. The two quilts remained in the family, treasured heirlooms that carried the story forward. James displayed his grandmother's quilt in a place of honor at the ranch house, explaining its significance to every new generation. Rose kept Tom's quilt in her own home, and she too told the story of a desperate journey and an unexpected love, of a woman with nothing and a man who saw everything. And on winter nights, when the wind howled across the Wyoming prairie and snow piled against the windows, the family would gather around fires and tell the story again. About Eleanor Hartwell, who came west with nothing but a worn quilt, and Tom Reed, who promised her a home. About how they built a life together through hard work and harder times, through joy and sorrow, through every season and challenge. About how sometimes the best things in life come from the worst circumstances, and how love can transform everything. The ranch continued to prosper, generation after generation adding their own chapters to the story. But it all started with that moment on a frozen platform in January 1884, when a cowboy saw a woman with nothing and decided she deserved everything. When a worn quilt became the foundation of a home that would shelter love and family for more than a century. That was the story. That was the legacy. And it was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth preserving for all the generations to come. Because it was a story about hope and courage and the transformative power of love. It was a story about home, not as a place but as a feeling, as a promise kept, as a life built together one day at a time. And it was a story that would never truly end, because love like that, real and deep and enduring, never really dies. It just keeps going, kept alive in quilts and memories and the faces of children who carry forward the best of those who came before. Eleanor and Tom's love lived on in their descendants, in the ranch they built, in the community they helped shape, in the values they passed down. That worn quilt Eleanor brought on the train was more than just a blanket. It was a bridge between past and future, a reminder of where she came from and how far she had traveled. And the home Tom gave her was more than just walls and a roof. It was belonging and purpose and love, everything that makes life worth living. In the end, that is what matters. Not what we arrive with, but what we build. Not what we lose, but what we find. Not the hardships we face, but how we face them together. Eleanor brought nothing but a worn quilt on the train, but she left behind a legacy richer than gold. A family that would remember her strength. A story that would inspire generations. and proof that sometimes the most beautiful journeys begin with nothing but hope and courage and one person willing to say, "I will give you a home."